Justice is a promise, a vow to victims that the guilty will pay and our communities will be safe. But what happens when that promise is broken? This is the story of Trevor Mills. His case is a chilling reminder of what can go wrong when the system fails. The justice system is built on rules meant to keep dangerous people off our streets. We trust that sentences for violent criminals mean what they say. But for years, a policy called good behavior credits created a dangerous loophole. It allowed violent predators to walk free long before their sentences were up. The system gambled with public safety, and in Trevor Mills's case, it lost. We hear about rehabilitation, about second chances. Sometimes it works, but not always. Some criminals are beyond reform. Trevor Mills was one of them. He fooled the system, earning credits for good behavior while hiding his true nature. His release was not mercy. It was a catastrophic failure. The laws that let him out were meant to be compassionate, to reward rule followers and ease overcrowding, but they failed to distinguish between non-violent offenders and violent predators. The public was kept in the dark. Victims' families weren't notified. A killer was given the keys to his own cage. Trevor Mills's story is a warning, a lesson about the difference between good intentions and real-world consequences. The system's compassion became its blind spot. The tragedy that followed shattered a family and exposed a fatal flaw. This is the story of how it all came crashing down, and the fight to make sure it never happens again. Justice is more than a promise, it's a responsibility. When the system forgets that, innocent people pay the price, and that's a cost we can never accept. Good behavior credits were meant to reward inmates for following the rules, shaving days off their sentences for every day of compliance. Originally, this was for non-violent offenders, people who made mistakes, not monsters, but the laws were written too broadly. Violent criminals, like Trevor Mills, earned the same credits as petty thieves. The system didn't look at the crime, just the inmate's daily behavior. This created a loophole, a dangerous blind spot that violent offenders learned to exploit. The public believed a 20-year sentence meant 20 years. In reality, good behavior credits could cut that by a third or more, without any public hearing or parole review. It was an administrative function, a silent calculation. The result? Violent predators walked free, and no one outside the system knew until it was too late. The good behavior system, meant to manage prisons, became a ticking time bomb. And Trevor Mills was the one who set it off. The consequences would be devastating. Trevor Mills's criminal path began early, petty crimes escalating to brutal violence. Friends and family described him as cruel, a bully who preyed on the weak. His first major conviction was for a savage assault and armed robbery. He didn't just rob, he terrorized, showing no empathy. Prosecutors called him a threat to society. The judge agreed, handing down a long sentence. But inside prison, Mills became a model inmate, on paper. He avoided trouble, joined programs, and played the part of a reformed man. Prison officials saw compliance, not cunning. They believed the system was working, but a prison is a controlled environment. A smart predator knows the rules are just another game. Mills wasn't rehabilitated. He was patient. He put on an act, waiting for his chance. The system checked boxes, counted credits, and missed the truth. Mills's early release wasn't earned. It was a product of a system blind to deception. The warning signs were there. The system just wasn't looking. And the cost of that oversight would soon become clear. Trevor Mills was never reformed. He was just waiting. Trevor Mills's release was quiet. No parole board, no public notice. A clerk processed his paperwork, calculated his credits, and opened the gate. To the system, he was just another number. Mills was assigned a parole officer, but oversight was minimal. He said all the right things, passed his drug tests, and checked in on time. On paper, he was a success story, a model of rehabilitation, but beneath the surface, nothing had changed. The darkness that drove his first crime was still there. The community had no idea who their new neighbor was. No one knew about his violent past. The system's confidence in his reform was based on assumption, not evidence. Every positive report was another layer of deception. The system wasn't just fooled, it enabled him. The wolf was out of the cage, wearing sheep's clothing provided by those meant to protect the flock, and soon, the consequences would be deadly. Just over a year after his release, Trevor Mills committed a crime even more horrific than before. He broke into a family's home, inflicting terror and ending in a senseless murder. The public was horrified to learn the killer should have still been behind bars. Journalists uncovered his early release, granted not by a parole board, but by an automatic calculation. The system hadn't just made a mistake, it had enabled a killer. The first victim's family was devastated, learning of his freedom only after the new crime. Their trust in the justice system was shattered. The community's outrage was immediate. The good behavior law was now seen as a direct threat to public safety. The tragedy was more than a loss of life. It was a complete breakdown of trust. The public demanded answers and change. Outrage swept the city. The Trevor Mills story dominated headlines. Victims' rights groups rallied, demanding an end to the good behavior loophole. Politicians scrambled to respond, launching investigations and emergency hearings. The truth was undeniable. Thousands of violent offenders had been released early under the same system. The process was mathematical, with no room for judgment or consideration of the crime. The hearings were emotional, exposing a bureaucracy that had lost sight of public safety. The Trevor Mills case became a symbol of a broken system. The push for reform was now a mainstream demand. The time for excuses was over. Action was inevitable. Lawmakers responded with the Trevor Mills Law, a sweeping overhaul. The goal: close the good behavior loophole for violent offenders. The law created a list of violent felonies ineligible for sentence reductions. For crimes like murder and assault, inmates had to serve at least 85% of their sentence. Early release now required a full parole board review, not just a formula. Victims' families had to be notified and given a voice before any release hearing. The law restored integrity and transparency to sentencing. No longer could violent predators game the system. The passage of the Trevor Mills Law was a landmark moment. The state would no longer gamble with public safety. The Trevor Mills Law marked a turning point. Good behavior credits remained for non-violent offenders, but violent criminals faced real consequences. Sentences now meant what they said, restoring public trust. Parole boards, not formulas, decided early release for violent offenders. The system now looked deeper at psychological evaluations, remorse, and the nature of the crime. Critics worried about overcrowding, but the cost of the old system was too high. The lesson was clear. Rehabilitation is a goal, but not at the expense of public safety. The end of automatic mercy was a necessary correction. The law forced the justice system to balance hope with reality. The public could finally believe in the promise of justice again, and victims' families could find some measure of peace. The story of Trevor Mills is a lesson written in tragedy. Good intentions are not enough. Justice requires wisdom and vigilance. A system on autopilot became a weapon when it ignored the reality of evil. The reforms that followed reintroduced human judgment and accountability. They were built on the pain of those who paid the price for a loophole. Progress in justice is often reactive, born from catastrophe. The fight for justice is a constant struggle to close loopholes before they claim more victims. The case of Trevor Mills is a permanent warning against complacency. Laws must be examined and reformed to protect the innocent. Justice must have both a heart for mercy and a mind for reality. The promise of safety is one we must never allow to be broken again.